Loved the love stories in Final Fantasy. What is the impact of this magic system on the world around it? I love a story that changes every time you read it.
Hey everyone, this is Let's Play, where we cover the intersection of books and video games. I'm your host, Jonathan, and on today's episode of Chat Logs, we welcome the New York Times internationally best-selling fantasy author, Elise Kova. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
One of the reasons I'm really excited to talk to you is because I heard through the grapevine that you're a very, very big video game fan.
I am. My whole life. My older sister got me started on the NES when I was itty bitty, because she's 8 years older than me, so she got it first.
Nice. So yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you about your history with video games, how video games may have influenced your writing career, and in particular, how it may have inspired your latest fantasy series, Arcana Academy. If you don't mind, just providing maybe like a brief history of your writing career and the Arcana Academy series.
I've been writing professionally for 10 years now. I started out as an indie author, very happily have become a hybrid author, and very excited to be published with Del Rey for Arcana Academy. I now have over 30 books out, and all of them are epic fantasy, so Otherworld, sword and sorcery, epic stakes, action, adventure, with varying degrees of romance. I have my Married to Magic world, which are standalone, set in a shared world. A Deal with the Elf King was the first one published. Those are definitely like romantasy. Arcana Academy, I say, is epic fantasy, fantasy romance. Like it has heavy romance, but it also has a lot of like plot and action and political intrigue. So there's some amount of romance for most people, unless you're someone who is like, no romance whatsoever, I hate it. Then that one, I'm sorry, I have nothing for you.
Nice. Thank you for that. Cool. So what would you say were the first kind of games that really made you fall in love with gaming?
I think it was Final Fantasy, the original. I just remember seeing these character designs, and I would just read the game booklet that came in like the box with the cartridge, just for the pictures by Yoshitaka Amano. He became one of my favorite illustrators and artists, and I think it was this idea of, here's this magical world, which I always had a love and affinity for, that you get to run around in.
Yeah.
And that was sort of my, oh, this is really cool, this is a lot of fun.
What about the games that were kind of formative for you in terms of inspiring your, I guess, creative storytelling sensibilities?
The first one that comes to mind is The Legend of Zelda. Ocarina of Time, one of the best games ever made. I will go to war on that one. The story, the characters, I think that was one of the first games that I got swept away into an epic within a video game, and all of the side stories too that it has. From there, the next one was probably Final Fantasy X. So it went from 1, jumped all the way to 10.
Yeah.
That was the first game that I remember playing that I stayed up until 1 or 2 in the morning. One summer, my sister and I played almost in shifts, where it would be like I would grind out levels and then she would grind out levels while I was sleeping. Like, it was so much fun. But I think that's another moment of, you know, the story of that game hits you. The characters and even, I mean, even some of the more cringe dialogue that we love. We will always remember that scene.
The Final Fantasy series in particular, I think like most of their games always have some element of romance, but obviously 10 and probably 8 are like the two that really have like the romance story as like a driving force in the main narrative, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I would throw 9 in there just because I love Garnet so much. And that was probably, you know, big for me too, because when I got to play, 12, where there's not really as much of a romance plot line, I definitely started playing 12 and I was like, what is all this political stuff in my fantasy?
Yeah.
Will they, won't they story?
That one always felt very inspired by the Star Wars prequels to me.
Yes.
I think it was around that time, maybe like a few years later.
I definitely would agree with that. But I loved the love stories in Final Fantasy and the supporting cast of characters, for sure.
So I know you're a big fan of creating unique magic systems in your books, and I know in Arcana Academy in particular, there's a very unique one that's based on tarot cards. Can you talk a little bit about where that idea came from, and also if you have any particular methods in general for building out and designing the principles of magic in your stories?
So Arcana Academy didn't specifically come from a video game. I learned how to read tarot when I was like 7 or 8 years old for the first time, and it's always been a part of my life on and off ever since. And because of that, I knew that I wanted to wrap that into a magic system. Of course, I've loved video games that involve tarot, but that's more because I already love tarot. But I do think about building power structures in an almost video game leveling system-esque kind of way a lot of times when it comes to, because I like kind of harder, more structured magic systems on the whole. I have some softer ones, but I like to think about in Arcana Academy, there's this element of, you have the minor arcana, which arcanists, people who have this magic power, can use. And the minor arcana, for anyone unfamiliar, goes from 1 to 10, and then page, knight or prince, queen, king. And I kind of said, okay, I'm going to have a sort of leveling system where you have 1 to 5 is level 1, 6 to 10 is level 2, and then the royal suite is kind of level 3. And I structured that around the 3 years that students go into Arcana Academy. Whereas the first year, arcanists may have the ability to use more, but the idea is you're just learning those first 5 cards, and then you're learning, the next 5, and then you kind of master the most powerful ones in the minor arcana. And that very much, it even has like a bit of a leveling system in the book where at the start of every year, you sacrifice a future. Your future is your tuition to get into Arcana Academy. And you sacrifice a future to the chalice, and you kind of level up to the next level if you aren't already there.
Yeah, I really like that part of the book. Because most of the time people are like trying to achieve a fantasy or a destiny, but in that instance that you mentioned, it's like, okay, which pathway are you going to like completely nix, like whether it's love or adventure or whatever it is. So that was a really cool moment.
You got to sacrifice those souls or those runes at the bonfire. I mean, the chalice.
Exactly, yeah.
I really do love when they explain sort of magic systems in games. I mean, not to say that that's, I'll gladly play a game where it's just like, well, magic exists, here we go. But I do love when they do explore kind of what is the impact of this magic system on the world around it, and how does that shake out? Because that's one thing when I'm writing a book, I like to focus on what I call kind of the nexuses of power. And there's, hard power like military and stuff like that. And magic I put under that of, if a force like magic existed, there's going to be people who want to control it and to use it for ill, for good, or neutral. And I like games that do explore that element a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a cool element of Arcana Academy too, because I think like a big theme obviously is not just the power of the magic system, but like who has access to it.
Oh, thank you. I feel like that to me is a hallmark of like the dark academia genre. I think dark academia invites that question of who has access to information and why, and where does that privilege come from, and all of that. And so I definitely wanted to work a little bit of that into Arcana Academy for sure.
Nice. Speaking of dark academia, one of the things I really like about Arcana Academy is it is like a mix of different genres. You do have elements, there's like heist elements, there's obviously like the romance elements. There's even like maybe like a little bit of like Count of Monte Cristo vibes in the beginning that I kind of felt that I really liked. A big chunk of the story takes place in the Arcana Academy. What did you enjoy about designing how that academy kind of functioned, what the rules and leveling systems, like you said, were kind of entailed with that?
One of my favorite game franchises is the Persona franchise. Absolutely love Persona. The way that I explain Persona to someone who doesn't know it is I'm like, imagine if a slice of life choose your own adventure story meets a dungeon crawler meets a dating sim. And it's incredible. And I feel like that sort of love of why not a little bit of everything kind of sneaks into my stories, sort of what you're saying of, I wanted to set Arcana Academy in the academy, but I also wanted to have this world around it, and especially our main character, Clara. She comes from Eclipse City, which is right across a bridge from Arcana Academy. And her life was never really destined to put her in the academy. And so I knew that I wanted to take the reader out into Eclipse City, and I sort of needed a reason for her to do that, for her to reunite with those friends out there and her crew and really people who are like her family. And that kind of created the heist, but of course it has to tie back into the academy, and it is an academy, so she has to go to class too. So I think maybe a little bit of that love of like, but what if more kind of snuck into Arcana Academy when I was writing.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of Clara, I think like when you're doing a fantasy story, and you're spending all this time doing the world building. I feel like probably one of the big challenges is trying to figure out how to communicate all that lore that you've written to the reader without maybe bogging down the pacing or the plot in certain ways. And I think maybe another component of that is how to decide, whose perspective are we viewing the world through. So with Arcana Academy, the story's basically told like through Clara's eyes and through her words. Was that a tough decision for you? And why did you decide to kind of have the information, I guess, communicated to the reader in that fashion?
I love an unreliable narrator. I think everyone is the hero of their own story. And that notion is always very fun for me when it comes to creating characters, and it comes to, you have this character that you're so close to and you're in their head and they're presenting these things as the absolute truth because it is the absolute truth to them. But then something changes and you realize, oh wait, this is just one person who has one perception of the world and has based that perception off of information they were given that might not be the whole picture of information. And that's really fun for me to get to peel back those layers through a character's eyes, because it also creates all this tension and drama within the character when they have to go. And for Clara, a big part of it is Kalis, the prince, the male main character. He is the one, and headmaster of the academy, he is the one that is not like she thought. And I really like stories told from a single point of view for that reason, of getting to really have characters that have these deep, dark secrets that I get to reveal, like in Prince of Swords, where I reveal a lot of things.
Nice. So in our emails when we were setting this up, you had mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit about environmental storytelling in video games. And I was very excited to talk about that because I feel like when video games do environmental storytelling really, really well, that's when they do start to feel kind of like books, because it's that weird kind of satisfaction you get where your mind is filling in the gaps. And I feel like that's always the best kind of way to help world build or communicate a story. What are the games that you think really do environmental storytelling really well? And if any of them inspire how you kind of go about building out a world and communicating the environment to the readers?
I think everyone would probably agree when I say the Soulsborne games. I mentioned them earlier. I started with Demon's Souls, loved it, played through all of the Dark Souls. But I think it was really when Bloodborne came out that was just, that game has my whole heart and then some. I have friends that I joke with. You know that meme of like, Martha, I can finally leave, sweetie. I'm back building again. That's how I feel about Bloodborne, where it's like, I'll be like, okay, I've gone 2 days without thinking about it. And then my friend will send me a text message where they're like, guess what, they're making a Bloodborne movie. And I'm like, this is gonna be my new obsession again.
Oh yeah, it's animated, right?
It is.
I heard about that, yeah.
Hopefully, I know how the film process goes. Hopefully it makes it to the end and it's good, but I'm really excited for it. And I just think Bloodborne was kind of that. I also love, cosmic horror and eldritch abominations and that sort of thing. And that game, though, you enter into this world, and from the moment you step in, you enter Yharnam, and it's destroyed, and it's the night of the hunt, and there are just people littering the streets, and the locals are hostile to you, and you are just dropped into something happening. And that feeling is what I love to kind of bring into my stories, if I can. And I try really hard to strike the balance of, if a reader just wants to read for fun and they're just enjoying the ride, they don't have to look deeper. Like I've given enough kind of on that surface level that they can just skim the surface, have fun, enjoy the book. But I try to then have enough layers where I'm like, the people who want to look deeper, the people who are like, wait a second, she described this statue in this way, and then she described that statue in that way, and they're exactly the same. What does it mean? I love to try and like leave those in the book to create that sort of sense of this world that's been existing for a really long time.
Yeah, I love that. In games and especially in books too, where you can like go on the Reddit threads or whatever, and like everyone has a different opinion on like what these things mean. Like to me, like that's almost as fun as the reading. And I love that. And yeah, you mentioned the FromSoft games, so many great moments of environmental storytelling. I just think the one thing that they do so well, probably better than any other developer right now, is that that just like overwhelming sensation of like hopelessness that it's just in everything. It's in the menus, it's in like the leveling system, even all the like the NPCs you talk to, they're all like the most miserable people. And it's just, I love it so much.
My husband is constantly like, he's like, why do you enjoy these games? They seem so stressful and bleak. And I'm like, that's why I enjoy them. I don't know how to describe it.
So you did mention a little bit earlier about Prince Kalis too. I do want to talk to you about romance. And how you approach that. It's very much intermixed with a lot of tension, a lot of danger because of the situation that Clara's being put in by Prince Kalis. Do you have like a way that you approach romance within the fantasy setting? Is there like a specific way that you go about it and how you kind of build out these long, in-depth relationships with characters?
I think when I'm building out a romance, you know, I think about everyone is flawed. Everyone has wounds and has these flaws and has these falsehoods that they believe about themselves and the world. And I think that the other romantic partner needs to challenge those. And whether that is challenging them outright by calling them out, whether that is like bringing attention to them through their words and deeds, and then the person, you know, the other character has to reckon with what the information they're being presented, or, you know, something totally different where I try not to have like oh, this person's job is to fix me. It's more, oh, this person has made me re-examine myself, and now I want to fix myself to be better for them. And so that's kind of the avenue that I look at when building the romances. But I try to have almost an entire list of reasons why two characters can't or shouldn't be together, almost to the point that when I start writing, I'm going, how are they going to end up together though? But that's part of the fun for me is finding out that answer myself too, and letting that tension be such a driving force for the story.
Nice. Are you the kind of person that likes to plan out all the main plot points in your stories before you actually start writing, or do you kind of like to just do it sort of as you go along?
For first books, and this has evolved over the years, but at this point for first books, I like to have the main beats, so the inciting incident, the midpoint, the climax, the ending. And I might have some ideas for scenes and rough ideas of where they will fit into that structure, but I don't necessarily plan everything out because I kind of need to feel out the world organically, and I need to meet the character organically. And it results in me rewriting, much to probably my editor's dismay, but rewriting a lot, especially of my first drafts and of first books. But then later books in the series, and what I've done with Arcana Academy is I have outlined a lot more extensively, mostly because there are so many plot threads in Arcana Academy. I won't give any spoilers, but there is a card that can change the world. And one might imagine this card has been used before. I don't know, but I do know. But because of that, I have to kind of keep track of like, if hypothetically speaking it was used, what did it change? How did it change? And that kind of thing. And so, you know, I'm trying to keep track of all of that, and as you get deeper into the world, all of those loose threads kind of come to life, and I got to figure out a way that they really come to life in book 2 to then come back together in book 3, and hopefully a way that's a nice bow that's satisfying for the reader.
Nice, that sounds amazing. So are there any games in particular that you think actually that handle romance really, really well?
You know, I'm not going to say Final Fantasy, although Titus and Yuna. I will actually say, and maybe this isn't what you're looking for, but I will actually say Last of Us. Because I think Last of Us captures a platonic familial romance between Joel and
Ellie?
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I was like,
wait a second. Only the main character. I think that captures all of the complexities, but earnestness of a familial kind of love that, and all of its thorny parts too, that I really admire in playing that game. Because, you know, at the end of the game, you're very much, try not to spoil, though I think most of us know the ending of The Last of Us by now, but by the end of the game, you're faced with this really difficult decision that you kind of do, because it's what you have to do, but and you're just sitting there and you're going, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? But you understand where he's coming from as a character. You understand the love that he's kind of formed. That kind of storytelling just, I think, is incredible.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I do love how their relationship is, the development of their relationship is also kind of mirrored in the gameplay. How like in the beginning it's more of like an escorty kind of mission where you have to protect Ellie, and then she becomes more capable. She starts to become more brutal because of like how brutal the world is.
And then the first time you play as her, you're like,
yeah.
what?
Amazing stuff. So we talked obviously a lot about video games. I'm curious though, who were some of the authors, maybe fantasy authors, that were really like influential for your writing?
Tolkien, probably one of the first. My parents are fantasy people. Gandalf was the Wi-Fi password to our house for the longest time, before I knew who Gandalf was. So Tolkien's got to be in there, because I know even before I had memories, they were reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings to me, which are great bedtime stories, apparently, when you're, 2.
Yeah.
And then Dave Duncan has a series called A Man of His Word. And the first book is Magic Casement. And that one was recommended to me in high school from a drama teacher. And I was going through a tough time, and it was just like a teacher, like, I know you love reading and you haven't been doing it a lot lately, and I feel like this book might speak to you. And it was just a teacher being nice. But it was one of those things where it was like, it felt like that book saved me, like in that moment, because it was a place to escape to, and it made the world feel better, and like just got my brain off of things. So that one will always have a special place in my heart. And then, I think kind of my romantasy awakening, there were 2 books that I remember. One was, I forget the author's names, but Blood and Chocolate, and then the other one was The Silver Kiss. And I think that was my awakening into romantasy, fantasy romance, where I went, wait a second, I can have all of the magic and other world and people kissing? Yes. So those kind of were also pretty formative for me. And then I've continued reading fantasy throughout the years.
Is there a book that you would love to see adapted into a video game?
I feel like Arcana would make a good Persona-esque style game. I'm just saying, if any studios are out there thinking about it. I just recently had the privilege of reading Defy the Dusk by Danielle Jensen. It's not out yet. But maybe it will be by the time you're watching this, whoever's watching this. But it kind of has like this Mad Maxy, Snowpiercer, dystopian fantasy kind of vibe. And they're fighting these monsters, and they're riding on these rigs that go on these like never-ending highways, and the monsters come out at night. And I could just see a really cool like Horizon Zero Dawn-esque game to that, where it's this action RPG, and during the daytime is when you like have camp and you can do the story, updates with your party. But then during the night, you're like action RPG fighting the Straxi and just killing things. So I would say that one.
Nice.
I played the shit out of that game.
Sweet. If Arcana Academy was made into a video game, specifically, like what are some of the elements that you would love to see?
I would love to see the magic system really wrought out. I would love to see a skill tree kind of system for it, where it's not just like, I cast this card and it's just the same thing over and over again. So I would really love to see that. I would love to see the cast brought in somehow. I grew up on turn-based RPGs. I love turn-based RPGs. So I would be very excited to see that, but I also think that an action RPG would probably fit it better. Just being told from Clara's perspective, I could see her sneaking through the tunnels under Eclipse City or jumping from rooftop to rooftop. And the Academy itself was actually partly inspired by Anne Orlando from Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3. And that scene of, in Dark Souls 3, when you're kind of going up and you're going up the buttress to kind of that grand entrance where, I forget the boss. I can see the boss because I slammed my head against that wall enough times. I forget the name of the boss that you fight in there, but that progression just really stuck in my head, those sort of gothic spires and this feeling of the structure that's just larger than life and almost is like a thing of its own. And that kind of is the Academy in my mind.
So, Elise, what would you say is your all-time favorite video game story?
I'm gonna say Bloodborne. People are gonna be like, that's not a story. And if you don't want to read every single item description, I respect your choices. Those are probably better choices. But I think what I love about that story that takes place is that there are so many stories in one kind of coming together. And again, that sense of history and place, when you have the history of the Healing Church and Yarnum and the School of Mensis and that sort of history and how that rift and fracture kind of created the bedrock of this problem that evolves. And then, you get to the end of that game and there are 3 distinct endings. And it's very easy to be like, oh, well, you get this ending if you do these things in the game, and you get that ending if you do these things in the game. And that is true, like mechanically that's true. But I think what each of the endings are saying and what choosing them could mean is very fascinating because, and I'm going to try and do this, maybe light spoilers, but you have the one ending where it's like you embrace the dream. You wake up the next day, but it's like, did you kind of thing? And then you have another one where you become the kind of the great hunter and you take over. And then you have the last one where, you ascend, and I'll just leave it at that. And I think what action you choose, there's a lot of narrative implications, and it can reframe the whole story. And then when they came out with the Old Hunters DLC, and you had the Child of Kos, and how that completely reframed like the Healing Church and what they did, and you look back at the main game and you even see the doll as very different because you met Maria, and you start to go, wait a second. So I think that, to me, I love a story that changes every time you read it because an ending, you see different things along the way. And I try and do that when I write because I try and think, like, if someone gets to the end of my series and goes back to book 1, I want them to be like, oh, these are all the little things I missed that she was seeding to get to this end result. The second book in Arcana Academy, Prince of Swords, is going to be out in July 21st. I'm so excited for readers to get that book because there are scenes that I wanted to write since starting writing Arcana Academy 1, and I finally got to write them in Prince of Swords because I feel like a book 2 in a trilogy, the job of that is to answer all the questions of book 1 in a way that create more questions for book 3. So I get to kind of like give answers and then blow everything up. And that book was so much fun to write, and I'm excited for it to be in readers' hands.